You know how sometimes you can develop feelings for someone, only to later find yourself despising them at the same time? It's almost like the reverse of the same chemical reaction. I work as a mid-level manager at a large chain of retail stores. My job mostly involves interacting with external contacts, and since I don't really supervise anyone directly, what happens inside the store doesn't have much of an impact on me. That's why I wasn't too concerned when I started dating Tiffany, a sales associate at the store. There wasn't any huge scandal because I wasn't her superior, and though we didn't flaunt our relationship, we didn't exactly hide it either. In an environment where rumors spread faster than wildfire, especially among the female staff, it didn't take long for everyone to find out. After a year of dating, we were planning our wedding. Honestly, the whole thing might have remained a secret for longer if Tiffany hadn't shared it with her co-workers. But as the saying goes, one person confides in another, and soon enough, the entire team knew. We had an incredible relationship. We were intimate nearly every night and never fought. Tiffany was breathtaking, with a stunning figure and a beautiful face. She always arrived an hour early to work and left an hour early too before Chase showed up. Everything seemed perfect until he arrived. Chase was hired to handle stock, move pallets, unload trucks, and assist with warehouse work. At first glance, he seemed normal, taller and bulkier than me, with an athletic build and an average-looking face. But his behavior quickly became apparent. He was a bold flirt. Word spread that he'd try his charm on nearly every woman at the store. After work, he'd choose one, win her over for a while, and then move on when things inevitably ended. It was a cycle that repeated itself over and over. What bothered me wasn't just his flirting, but the way he took an immediate dislike to me. I would have been indifferent if it weren't for his constant snide remarks. He would make these jabs at me, without any apparent reason. I always found myself at a loss for a witty comeback. They were the kind of comments that didn't provoke physical reactions, but were instead sharp, public insults. Later, I would replay the conversations in my mind, thinking of a perfect response, but it was always too late. He'd say things like, "Dude, if you're that worried about making it to the bathroom, we got adult diapers in stock." Or, if I was fidgeting, he'd mock, "Guess the only workout Logan can do is bending over to polish his shoes." The others would laugh, and even Tiffany would sometimes join in. It was humiliating, and it felt ridiculous to argue or get tough with him in front of everyone, so I just froze. Eventually, I started avoiding him, going out of my way if I spotted him nearby. But it seemed like he enjoyed cornering me, showing up when I least expected it, and making fun of me while pretending to be funny. Then one day, he learned about Tiffany and me. I saw him talking to her on multiple occasions, usually when there were no customers around. After he'd brought out merchandise, Tiffany would be laughing and twirling a strand of her hair, the same way she used to when she was with me, as he flirted with her. That night, I told her everything. How he was basically bullying me with his sharp remarks, how he had a reputation for playing the field, and how I was certain he was now setting his sights on her. "Tiffany," I said, "please don't entertain him. Don't talk to him. Don't hang out with him. He's already tried to cheat with half the women here, or at least attempted to. You can call me paranoid, but for him, it's like a game." She looked at me with tenderness, reassuring me. "Babe, I cherish you. Don't worry, I won't let him go anywhere with me." Though I should have felt relieved, a small part of me wished she had said she'd avoid him completely, and maybe even tell him to leave her alone. The next day, I saw them together, far from her section of the store, in the main aisle. She was laughing and smiling while he spoke to her. Having read a lot about body language in marketing books, I could easily pick up on the signs. Her posture told everything. Her feet were pointed directly at him, shoulders back, chest pushed out, and her wrist lightly grasped in his. It was a clear, silent signal, a declaration of interest, even though they weren't physically touching. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. That was the moment I realized she was no longer mine. Later that day, I caught them talking in 3 separate places, each time outside of her usual area, and each encounter charged with the same flirtatious energy. It wasn't the physical closeness or overt displays of affection. No kisses, no embraces, but the way she spoke to him, the attention she gave him. She was a clear invitation. When I tried to speak with her again that evening, she outright lied, denying that she had even talked to him. I saw you. I watched the security footage. Either of those facts would have been enough to prove it, but it didn't matter. There was still no proof of anything physical. She would just be more careful if I confronted her, wouldn't she? I kept hoping she would change her mind, but deep down, I knew it was slipping away. So I started snooping. I began arriving early to the store, claiming I was working on a marketing project. But really, I was checking the security footage to see if Tiffany and Chase were together. Meanwhile, I tried to show her love, making future plans in hopes she might resist whatever was happening with him. Then came Saturday. She didn't come home that night. When I arrived, an hour after her shift ended, her absence was obvious. All I got was a text saying she was out late, meeting up with friends. Even without hard evidence, I knew where she was. Then the proof came directly from Chase. He sent me a link to a video stored on his cloud. It was clear that he had filmed it with me in mind. As the video started, he smirked into the camera and gave me the finger. The footage shifted to Tiffany, completely engrossed in giving him attention. He turned the camera back to her and gently flicked her nose to get her attention. She looked irritated, but it was a playful kind of annoyance, the sort of teasing that some girls enjoy. "Hey," he said to her, "we'll watch this later and revisit the good times. Blow a kiss." She puckered her lips and gave a smile, raising 2 fingers in AV. It felt like she was performing for me, though, of course, she had no idea he intended to share this with me. At that point, everything between her and me was over. As for them, they carried on. And though it's hard to admit, I couldn't tear myself away from the video. I watched it all the way through, feeling each moment like a punch to the gut. "So, how was that?" Chase asked. "Am I better than Logan?" "Better?" Tiffany laughed. "I'm going to you at work tomorrow, before he even shows up." Chase half protested. "That's kind of risky." "I'll decide when and where," she replied, tapping his cheek. "Now you're mine." In that moment, as painful as it was, a strange sense of relief washed over me. There was no more uncertainty. I knew exactly where we stood now. I started packing her things into boxes. About an hour later, I drove to her parents' house, dropped off a duffel bag and 3 boxes at their door, rang the bell, and quickly left before they could see me. I returned to my car, headed home, and reached for a bottle of gin that Tiffany had given me a while back. I was about to open it when a crazy thought crossed my mind. Chase would surely be waiting to rub my nose in it at work the next day, probably in front of everyone. He'd think I'd be too humiliated to stand up for myself or admit that I'd been played. I'd be the pitiful guy, the one everyone whispered about. He showed me the video, and I was so humiliated I almost considered resigning. But a certain plan formed in my mind that I couldn't shake. So I turned off my phone, unplugged the doorbell, locked myself in, and put in some makeshift earplugs. I heard nothing. I slept soundly, like a rock. However, Tiffany spent an hour outside, screaming and pounding on the door, having a complete breakdown. My neighbors later told me all about it. Honestly, I didn't care where she went or where she slept. The next morning, I showed up to work. I parked a block away, carrying a paper bag. As I walked toward the entrance, I saw Chase standing there, surrounded by some warehouse guys and a few of the female employees. They were all watching me, eager to see how I'd react. I decided to put on a performance for them. I plastered on a big smile and called out, "Hey, Chase. Thanks, man. You really saved me a ton of trouble. Take this and have a drink if you want. You can even pass it to my ex if you'd like." I pulled out the bottle of gin from home, making sure everyone knew it wasn't store property. "What?" He blinked, clearly confused. Yeah, I said, still smiling. For a long time, I've been wanting to break up with Tiffany. She never gave me a reason, so I felt bad. But once I saw you pursuing her, I stayed quiet. I was afraid that if I confronted you, you'd back off, and I'd never be able to get rid of her. But thanks to you, I finally have the perfect reason to end it. So, I'm free. It's amazing. I appreciate you doing all the heavy lifting. Chase squinted at me. What are you talking about? What plan? I acted shocked, playing the part. Dude, you didn't realize? I figured you'd give me the perfect excuse to break up with her. You're smart enough to see what was going on, right? I guess she's the only one who's not going to win here, but at least no one can say I'm the bad guy anymore. I'm done with her and her cheating. It's over. I looked at the group around us. Warehouse guys, salespeople, and other onlookers. Some were wide-eyed. Others were snickering. That's when I saw one of his co-workers, holding a phone with a distinctive case. Oh, hey, I said, suddenly aware of what was about to happen. Did anyone watch that little clip? I gestured toward the phone. Mind if I take a look? The colleague froze as I snatched the phone from his hand. My fingers were shaking with adrenaline, but I acted calm. I sifted through the files on Chase's phone, found the video folder, and hit send to all contacts. Then I hit OK and pretended to be confused. Wait a second. I think I accidentally clicked something. Let's see. I pressed play. In less than a minute, Chase's moment of triumph turned into an utter disaster. I realized what I had done when the video started playing, and I couldn't go back. I had just sent every single file from his private folder to all of his contacts. People were crowding around as the explicit video played. Half a dozen women gasped in horror as they saw what was on the screen. One of them shouted, "Wait, you sent this to everyone in his contacts? That includes my husband." "God," she moaned. "My husband's in his contacts too." In no time, 5 women were shouting at both Chase and me. It turned out that the folder contained videos of him hooking up with several other married women, in addition to the one with Tiffany. Chase had access to the phone numbers of almost everyone, including some of their spouses. This meant that many husbands and parents were receiving a nasty surprise that morning. The rest of the drama would spread through rumors, even for those who didn't get the video themselves. It wasn't until lunch that I saw Tiffany. Her eyes were bloodshot from crying, and her face was ghostly pale. When our eyes met, I could see pure terror in her expression. But it wasn't fear of me. It was more like a realization of what had happened to her life. Aside from a few women who were also freaking out because their husbands had received videos, the rest of the staff avoided her. Chase didn't show up to work the next day. By lunchtime, word had spread that he had been severely beaten by some thugs and was likely not coming back after his hospital stay. Apparently, broken bones take a long time to heal, even with heavy makeup covering the bruises. A few of the sales associates couldn't hide their sadness, their bright eyeshadow only emphasizing the tear-streaked faces underneath.